Chapter 1. My business phone rang. I stared at the digital clock next to my bed. It flashed 1:34 a.m. with way too much brightness for that time of night. My boyfriend Daryl turned over with a groan and asked groggily, "Babe, do you want me to get that?" The call was probably from my former client Suzanne. A few months ago, she had hired me to find her long-lost daughter Catalina, who had vanished more than 20 years ago. I had looked everywhere, online, newspapers, death indexes, and the courts. To my chagrin, I couldn't find one clue on what had happened to her. Suzanne wanted her money back. I had refused because I had done my job. In the beginning, she would call during regular business hours and make her demands. Now, she was calling at all times of the night, and she'd even posted a few mean online reviews. If her harassment didn't stop soon, I might be forced to get a restraining order against her. "Check the caller ID," I ordered. "It's blocked," Daryl replied as he leaned over to see the screen. "Then let it go to voicemail." "Okay, babe." The phone rang 2 more times. My answering machine clicked on. The caller hung up. Good. It must have been a wrong number. The phone rang again. God damn it. Why couldn't Suzanne leave me alone? "Babe, I think they really want to talk," Daryl said. "Go answer it then," I replied. "Tell Suzanne that I don't take calls outside of normal business hour." "No, better yet, tell her I'm not here, that I'm out of town or something." Daryl nodded. He picked up the phone and mumbled hello. He spoke with the caller for a few seconds and turned to me. "This lady isn't Suzanne. It's somebody else. She wants help on a case." What should I tell her? How could he ask me such an asinine question? A case meant money. "Hand me the phone." Daryl nodded and gave me the phone. I cleared my voice as I switched on a small lamp next to my bed. "This is Erica Mudrose speaking. How can I help you?" "Ma'am, my name is Liz Polroy. I'm so sorry for waking you in the middle of the night. I was just going to leave a message for you to call me in the morning. I really need your help." I rubbed my forehead. The name Polroy didn't sound familiar at all. "No problem. What do you need help with?" I asked. Liz sighed. "My husband was found last Thursday with a bullet in his head." "Ma'am, I'm really sorry about your husband," I said in a somber voice. I wondered about the lack of emotion in her voice. I then realized that she could still be in shock. "Where was he found?" At the Criteway Hotel. You know, the one near the Chatham County Airport. Criteway hosted lavish events and business conferences. It was built 2 years after Chatham had become California's newest county. Back in the 70s, a coalition of social justice groups decided they wanted to honor the memory of the late civil rights leader Sonia Chatham, who had been gunned down by her ex-husband during a domestic violence fight. Miss Chatham was known for her activism in San Joaquin, Santa Clara, and Alameda counties in Northern California. As a result, the coalition placed an initiative on the ballot to take unincorporated portions of these counties so that Chatham County could be formed. A bitter election ensued. The land developers and traditionalists opposed the initiative. They outspent the coalition by more than $1 million. Nonetheless, voters were not persuaded. The initiative overwhelmingly passed by a 2-to-1 margin. Was your husband there on business? I asked. Hell no, Liz answered. That's where he and his slut girlfriend normally met for their Thursday night dalliance. Dalliance? That was so classic, a man cheating on his wife. Maybe this was why the woman wasn't too sorry he was dead. Did his girlfriend find him? Nah, it was someone from the hotel's staff. His girlfriend wasn't at the hotel when they found your husband? I asked. The phone was silent for a few seconds. I really don't know, Liz finally answered. The police are looking into it. All right. Who do you think killed him? Could be the slut. But it might be someone he evicted. Do you and your husband own rental property? I asked. No, we don't have any tenants at all. My husband's a lawyer and he evicts tenants. What's your husband's name? Calvin. Calvin Poleroy. I asked. No, it's Calvin Norwich. I sighed. Calvin Norwich was known as Chatham County's eviction man. Calvin worked for the banks and property owners. He ran a law practice that evicted hundreds of tenants each year. Calvin specialized in evicting former owners of foreclosed properties. I see. Can we meet in the morning? I asked. No, I don't want to wait that long, Liz protested. The police have asked me some really strange questions. I think they may try to blame my husband's murder on me. I need help with clearing my name. I ran my hand over my unruly hair with another sigh. So much for being sorry that she had woken me up. For the police, the spouse is always the first suspect in a murder investigation. There's no way I'd ever kill my husband. He might be a bastard, but killing him just isn't my style. I believe you, I lied. I pulled the receiver away from my mouth as I unsuccessfully tried to stifle a yawn. Recovered, I admonished the woman firmly, but you really should talk to a lawyer about your legal rights. I went to law school. So, I know my rights, Liz hissed. You're a lawyer like your husband? I asked. No, never passed the bar. I'm in public relations. Work for a nonprofit that helps midlife women in crisis. I reflected. Big murder case. Jealous wife, girlfriend, and evicted tenants. Lots of players. On top of this, the wife works for a nonprofit. Maybe I could make some money and do some good. Where do you want to meet? I asked. At your office, she replied. You're downtown, right? My office? I had shut it down a couple of months ago because business had been slow. Right now, I was operating out of my living room. How about if we meet at your house? I asked. That'll work, Liz replied. She dictated her address and gave me directions. I'll see you in a bit. After we said our goodbyes, I hung up the phone. I stared at the phone for a couple of seconds, then got up from bed and switched on a larger lamp so I could see the clothes in my closet. Daryl looked up at me. Leaving, babe? I nodded. I could tell he was trying to decide whether to ask me if he could come along for protection. It was a long-standing quarrel between us. He hated the possible dangers that came with me being a private investigator. Finally, he said, "Okay, be safe. I'm going back to sleep." Thanks, I said, truly thankful that I didn't have to leave yet another potential client waiting while my boyfriend and I went through the same tired argument. I walked to my closet and grabbed a sweater, skirt, tights, and a pair of boots. I quickly got dressed. To my dismay, I could barely zip my skirt. Since moving my office into my condo, I have gained almost 15 pounds. You'd think at 5'10" that I could easily hide the extra weight. Instead, I was starting to get a small belly. My thighs and ass used to be muscular and firm. Now, they were becoming soft and spongy. Daryl didn't mind that I had gained weight. At a little over 6 feet and 230 pounds, Daryl was a big man. Daryl liked big women and he was always telling me that I was too skinny. I shook my head. I walked into the bathroom, turned on the light, and pulled out a wide tooth comb from the cabinet. I combed my thick shoulder-length dark brown, curly hair, put on a dab of makeup, and lip gloss. I checked myself in the mirror. there were times I felt like a chameleon. I could easily pass for Italian, Latina, Persian, or Greek. But the truth was none of these. My lineage was African American, Eastern European Jewish, Irish, English, and a bit of Native American. Daryl's fair skin contrasted with his thick dark wavy hair that was peppered with gray streaks. On top of this, Daryl had the cutest dimples and cleft chin. He was so handsome. I smiled. Enough about looks, I needed to focus on my case and make some money. I was behind in most of my bills except for my mortgage and credit cards. It didn't help that Daryl hadn't worked in the last 5 months. He'd been laid off from his job from a high-tech company. He claimed that no one would hire him because he was too old. They wanted young kids fresh out of college. Since when was 46 too old to work? Daryl had at least 20 years before Social Security would kick in. Besides, it wasn't as if he had tried that hard to look for work. He'd only apply for 3 or 4 jobs a week. And he wouldn't do things that could make him more attractive as a candidate. Told Daryl to dye his hair so he'd look younger. He refused to do this. Daryl claimed it wouldn't make a difference because they would know his age from his job application. Daryl spent most of his days playing video games and doing nothing else. Even though he occasionally tried to play the role of protector, much of the time it was as if he had reverted to being a child. And although I was 3 years younger than he was, I felt like his mother at times. Most days I wanted to throw him out, but he had nowhere to go. Plus, Daryl was still hurting from the recent loss from his father. So, I needed to give him time to heal. I switched my attention back to my reflection in the mirror. I brushed my teeth, did a final check of my face, and then shut off the bathroom light. I walked into the living room and grabbed my coat, laptop, bag, and notepad. Now, I was ready to see my new client. Hopefully, with a little luck, I'd be able to find her husband's killer. Chapter 2. As I drove down the tree-lined street to the address Liz had given me, I felt out of place with my battered 9-year-old car. It didn't feel like the Chatelaine I was accustomed to. My East Chatelaine neighborhood was filled with a hodgepodge of old homes, government-subsidized apartments, and below-market condos. In contrast, Liz lived in Chatelaine Valley, an area with sprawling million-dollar homes and extravagant cars. Most folks in my neighborhood were struggling to survive the recession, while people in Chatelaine Valley appeared to be unscathed. Within a couple minutes, I was in front of Liz's home. I parked, grabbed my belongings, and got out of the car. I walked up to Liz's porch and knocked on the door. A light came on. The door cracked slightly open. "Is that you, Erica?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes," I answered. A rotund woman who was about 5'7" or 5'8" opened the door. Her turquoise sweater accented her green eyes and her boot-cut jeans gently skimmed her full thighs. The woman's short, dishwater blonde hair was expertly cut into layers that gracefully framed her round face. In the night light, it was a little hard to guess her age. She might be in her early 40s or maybe a little bit older. The woman smiled. "I'm Liz. Come on in." I entered the house and followed Liz into the living room. I had to stop myself from gasping. The living room was bigger than my entire condo. The room was decorated with eclectic pieces of art from Asia, Africa, and South America. The hardwood floor was covered with a large flaming yellow rug with a red stripe down its middle. Liz and I sat down on the expansive red couch. I pulled out my notepad from my bag. "Do you want anything to drink?" Liz asked. "I can get you water, coffee, tea, or hot chocolate." "No, I'm good," I answered. "Liz, I want to express my condolences again over your husband's death." Liz gave me an appreciative look. "Thanks, I'm still in shock. I never expected to lose him this young." "How old was he?" "Calvin was turning 48 this year." I shook my head. "You just never know how much time you have." "You're right. I still can't believe he's gone." "You mentioned his girlfriend might have killed him." Liz winced. "The slut?" "Yeah, she could have done it." She nodded firmly as if trying to convince herself. "What's her name?" "Veronica Quainwood." "Do you know how long they've been seeing each other?" "About 6 months. Maybe a little longer." "Did your husband have any other affairs?" Liz groaned. "On and off during our marriage. I'd find out and threaten to leave him. He'd be good for a while and then he'd find someone new." "So why do you think Veronica might be the culprit?" "Because a few days ago, she came by the house. Claimed Calvin was hers and I needed to let him go." My eyebrows arched. "So, what did you tell her?" "I told her to go to hell and there was no way I'd ever divorce Calvin." I tapped my pen lightly on my notepad. "I'm not an expert on divorce. But my understanding is that in California, spouses don't need permission to divorce. If one wants out, then it's over." "You're correct on the law, but Calvin had a lot to lose if he left me." "What do you mean?" Liz rolled her eyes. Calvin doesn't own a goddamn thing. This house is mine. I own the cars we drive and the building where Calvin has his law office. I look at Liz with a puzzled expression. On the phone you told me you worked for a nonprofit. I just assumed that. Liz interrupted me before I could finish my sentence. That's a bad assumption. I inherited money from my aunt years ago. Because I invested it well, I really don't have to work. The nonprofit is something I like to do. I sighed. It's great you have your own money. But Calvin has his own law practice. He's doing evictions. Isn't he doing well? With the recession, Calvin has made a hell of a lot of money. But he's also made a lot of bad investments. Like losing money in the stock market? I asked. Liz narrowed her eyes. Calvin's too stupid to play the market. Instead, he likes to gamble his money away. He's always broke. I looked at Liz directly in the eyes. Liz, I don't mean to offend you. But I don't understand why you're with him. He's broke and he's a cheater and a gambler. It seems to me that you'd be better off if you'd had divorced him. Liz looked down at the floor and then back up at me. Well, the thing is that I couldn't leave Calvin, because. Because why? Because I'm addicted to him. Addicted how? Liz's face turned a bright red. The sex. It's so good. I mean, Calvin knew how to please me. I mean, really please me. He could make me climax. You know, not just once, but over and over. And I'm not just talking about multiple orgasms, but double-digit orgasms. I couldn't even fathom that. Daryl was good, but he wasn't that good. So, you stayed him because of sex? But he's a cheater. Erica, I have an incredibly high sex drive and I need someone who can meet my desires and needs. Before I met Calvin, no one else could satisfy me. And I mean no one. After Calvin I started dating, I knew that he was the one. I just had to have him. And the more I had him, the more I wanted him. And what about the cheating? I asked. That didn't happen until we were married. I wanted to leave Calvin, but I couldn't. I was just too addicted to him. I needed him like a crackhead needs cocaine. Calvin was my drug of choice. And you never thought that there could be someone better than Calvin. You know, someone who'd respect you and give you what you needed. Erica, I'm not a kid. I'm 48 years old. It took me years to find Calvin, and I didn't want to start over for some whimsical fantasy man. My head began spin. Incredible sex with a lousy jerk. Sounded like a really bad deal. And what if Calvin decided that he didn't want your money anymore and left you? I asked. Liz shook her head. That's not even a possibility. My Calvin had his pride. He knew me that without me, he'd have nothing. And I mean nothing. He'd have nowhere to live and nowhere to practice. Could you imagine what the media say if Chatham County's eviction man became homeless? My God, it'd be so embarrassing. But if Calvin got help for his gambling problem, he could turn his life around, right? I argued. Liz smirked. Are you kidding me? Calvin didn't have that kind of willpower. What if he got money from Veronica, his girlfriend? The slut. She's broke and her house is underwater. So, you're saying because Veronica has nothing, Calvin would stay with you? Absolutely. So, besides Veronica, is there anyone else who might have killed him? Like I told you on the phone, it could have been one of the tenants he'd evicted. Any recent threats? Liz shrugged her shoulders. None, I can recall. But our number is unlisted. Calvin could have gotten calls at his office or on his cell phone. So, Calvin never mentioned anything to you? I asked. Liz shook her head. No, he didn't. I took a deep breath and exhaled. Can you tell me where you were when Calvin died? I was at home watching TV. Was anyone here with you? No, it was just me. How long were you at the house by yourself? Got off work around 6. Got home around 6:30 or so. Did anyone come by the house? Except for the cops and you, no one else. I sighed. This case was getting worse by the minute. No witnesses to verify Liz's alibi. Plus, she was sex-crazed and possessive. Is there anything else I should know? Liz looked at me. I know that my case doesn't sound good. But I'm innocent. I never would do anything to hurt my Calvin. Erica, I really need your help. Will you take my case? I couldn't tell if Liz's look was sincere. But even if it weren't, I needed the money. Yes, I'll do it. I then quoted Liz my retainer fee of $3,000 and an hourly rate of $150 an hour. To my surprise, Liz didn't quibble with me on my fees. Instead, she smiled. That's fine. Let me get my checkbook. Liz got up from the couch and went into another room. After a couple minutes, she came back with her checkbook. I pulled out my client service agreement from my bag and showed it to her. Liz read the contract and signed it. She then handed me check. "So how did you find about me?" I asked. "Did someone refer you?" "No, I found you online," Liz answered. "I saw you had a law degree. I liked that." "Well, I never passed the bar." "Neither did I. Taken it 18 times. Came close a few times. But I think this time I am going to pass. Taking the bar again at the end of February. Hope you pass. You deserve it." "Thanks." Liz smiled. "What about you? Are you still trying?" "No, gave up after my 4th time." Liz frowned. "It's too late to sign up for the February bar, but maybe you can sit for the July bar." "Maybe I will," I lied. The truth was I had given up dreams of being a lawyer long ago. I was bad at taking tests. I freaked out and I couldn't manage my time. There was no way I'd ever pass the bar. "Hope you take the bar again because we big girls need to stick together," Liz said in an almost bubbly voice. I wanted to wince. Yes, I had gained some weight, but I didn't think of myself as big. Then again, if my newly gained size endeared me to my new client, I needed to use it for my advantage. I feigned a smile and said, "Indeed, we do." "So, what's next?" Liz asked. "I'll do some checking around. I have a friend at the police department. I'll talk to her. I'll also need to go court and check out your husband's recent eviction cases." "What about the slut?" "She's on the list," I answered. "Good," Liz said. "Just one other thing. You need to get a lawyer." "But if we clear my name?" "Liz, it'll take some time," I said with soothing voice. "Find someone you trust." "Is there anyone you can recommend?" I shook my head. The good lawyers I knew were with the public defender's office. Because Liz wasn't poor, she wouldn't qualify for their services. But I'm sure if you do some research, you'll find someone good. All right. I'll think about it. Great, I'll give you a status report later on today. I got up from the couch and picked up my bag. We shook hands and said our goodbyes. Chapter 3. I looked at my watch. It was 8:45 a.m. I was sitting at a small round table at my favorite cafe in Chatlin. Lanita's Nibbles was known for its eclectic mix of hot chocolate, teas, and juices. Unlike other cafes, Lanita's didn't serve coffee. Some people avoided Lanita's because of this fact. Others like me enjoyed being surrounded by non-coffee drinkers. When I was 17, I had my first sip of coffee and I couldn't stand the taste. Plus, it made me woozy. I tried coffee again 2 or 3 more times in college and in law school. My reaction was the same. As a result, I absolutely abhor coffee. I took a sip of my mint soy hot chocolate and a bite of my dark chocolate chip muffin. I smiled. I loved chocolate and the combination was utterly delicious. I pulled out my laptop from my bag and propped it on the table. I turned it on and logged into Lanita's wireless network. It took about a minute before I was connected to the internet. I did a search and found the county's housing court's website. The housing court exclusively handled unlawful detainers, which was the legal name for evictions. I looked for Calvin's recent cases. Over the past month, Calvin had evicted more than 100 people. Most of the unlawful detainer judgments had been defaults, or uncontested evictions. In most cases, the tenants had been served with court papers, but they didn't file a response with the court. As a result, a default was taken. In 19 cases, the tenants had challenged their unlawful detainers. 16 of the cases had settled with a stipulation for a move-out date. 3 other cases had gone to trial. In one lawsuit, the tenant won. In the other 2, the trial judge had issued a judgment in favor of the landlord. I pulled out my notepad from my bag and wrote down the name of. I did a search for Brandon and Beverly Guilan. The only thing I could find was the couple's ages. Brandon was 73 years old and Beverly was 70. They weren't connected to any social media. Given the couple's ages, that wasn't odd. I then did a search for Manuel Barrett. A ton of sites came up. Manuel was a longtime community activist and housing advocate. He worked for the notorious Tenant Liberties League. Tenant Liberties was known for its unorthodox practices. Over the past 2 years, members of Tenant Liberties had tried to prevent the sheriff from carrying out a number of evictions. On the morning of a scheduled eviction, they would set up a human blockade in front of the tenant's residence. The sheriff would order the protesters to move. In most cases, the protesters would refuse to leave. Last year, over 200 arrests had been made, and since the beginning of this year, another 50 people had been arrested. Manuel's eviction was scheduled for Thursday. There were several news stories that Tenant Liberties was preparing for its largest protest in Chatlin. Over 500 members had vowed to build a human chain around Manuel's building. Tenant Liberties had called the eviction retaliatory for Manuel's housing advocacy efforts. For the past 14 years, Manuel had paid in his rent time and abided by the complex's rules. Last year, Switching Housing had bought the apartment building in a foreclosure proceeding. Manuel was later issued with a notice to vacate. In his eviction trial, the court found that Switching Housing had the right to evict Manuel. Chatelain didn't have a just cause eviction ordinance and tenants could be evicted for any reason. The court scoffed at Manuel's retaliation claim. Switching Housing argued it was evicting Manuel because it wanted to renovate his apartment. If he were inside the apartment, the renovations couldn't be done. As a result, Switching Housing had no choice but to evict Manuel. Manuel and his group Tenant Liberties loved publicity. But would Manuel be so bold to kill Calvin a few days before his scheduled eviction? At first glance, it sounded like a stupid move. But then again, perhaps Manuel thought it would bring his case to a higher level. I pulled out of my cell phone from my purse and called my best friend Jane Penlope. I had known Jane since we were in middle school. For the past 12 years, Jane had worked in the Chatelain Police Department. She was currently a lieutenant in the Homicide Division. Within a few seconds, she picked up. "Hi Jane, it's Erica. How are you?" "I'm good," Jane replied. "What's up? Have you heard about the murder of Calvin Norwich? The eviction lawyer?" "Yeah, my team is working on it. Can't tell you anything because it's confidential." "Any list of suspects?" I asked. "Come on Erica, you know better than that. The last time I told you something they nearly traced it back to me. Can't do that anymore because of it's too risky." I reflected. About a year ago, I had worked on the murder of a teenage girl. Jane had given me the name of the prime suspect before it became public. The prime suspect was the girl's father and the CEO of a high-tech company. After I confronted the likely perp, he went ballistic. He claimed he was innocent and he had been wrongly maligned. When the evidence later showed that the culprit was someone else, he tried to sue the police department for defamation of character. The court tossed the case because it would open a Pandora's box. The court held that the police have a duty to investigate and in cases involving the deaths of children, the prime suspects are typically the parents, siblings, and other family members. As a result, the police had not committed defamation. "How about a hint?" I asked. "Sorry, that's not possible," Jane replied. "So, who are you working for?" Jane, if you won't tell me anything, I won't tell you either, I snapped. Erica, if you want to keep your stuff confidential, that's fine with me. I sighed. If you won't tell me anything off the record, can you tell me when a status update will be done? You mean a press conference? Jane asked. Yeah, I replied. Could be today. Could be tomorrow. I really don't know. You can check with our public information officer. All right. I will do that. Erica, I really need to get to work. I'll talk to you later. I hit the end button on my phone. The call to Jane had been a waste of time. However, at least because of my research, I now had at least one suspect. I did a search for Tenant Liberty's address. It was a few blocks away. I finished my hot chocolate and muffin. I rubbed my stomach. Now, I was ready to take on Manuel and his tenants' rights organization.